Ko tinana te waka, ko tinana te waka, ko tarakehe te manga, ko hokianga te wahapū, ko te raroa te iwi, ko tau maui tapu, ko Mātiatia te marae, ko Susan Reid, taku ingoa. I just should let you know I'm not a clinician. I get to be here today because I have lived experience. Apparently I was not the first choice to have this to present this, but I was the one who accepted. I was down a few. So this is about, metaphorically, in my case literally, getting your big person's pants on and having a conversation with whānau about a child who may not be a healthy weight. So that's what I'm going to talk about. The next time they hold one of these, it will not be called obesity, okay? Please, let's get rid of that word. I would like to start off by saying kia ora and thank you to you for the work you do in primary care. There's at least 5 of my favourite primary care physicians in the room today. They know who they are. And I'd like to thank you for the work you're doing, but I'm also going to thank you for what I'm going to ask you to do in future. So let's get on with it. I spent 4 years working with primary care in Counties Manukau, providing workforce development for primary care practices around the Raising Healthy Kids target as it was then. And I learnt a lot. I've learnt a lot from my own experience, and I'd like to start with some starting points. I'd just like to say, following on from what Helen said this morning, this is not a presumptive conversation. This is not, hey, we're going to have that talk about weight management today. This is a totally different conversation. But it shares the same things about you guys being trusted advisors and primary care being the child's healthcare home. These are the starting points for having this conversation. If you can't move past the slide, don't have the conversation until you can tick these things off. Weight is complex, it's not simple. If you still believe or have a bias that weight is about personal choice and lifestyle, you need to address and reflect on that bias. Cultural safety's done a lot of good. Whānau are trying their best, often in very, very difficult circumstances. They will be upset, angry, feel judged. They have the whole continuum of emotions when you have this conversation with them. Some of these conversations will go well, some of them will be and some will not go well. And you need to be prepared to be empathetic when they don't go well and say, that sounds really hard. Thank you very much for telling me that. And I'll follow up with you in 3 to 6 months just to see how things are going. As I said, weight isn't a lifestyle choice. So mind your biases and also mind your language. Please do not use words like obese. There's some things you can use which are like not a healthy weight, which is what I would recommend. But listen to what the whānau say. So if whānau use words like too big, then use that because you're reflecting back what whānau said. But don't use the F word. Don't use the fat word. If whānau use the fat word, ignore it. Keep talking about not a healthy weight. Okay? Because we need to get rid of that word. That's a damaging word. And I know the way it's used with kids is damaging. There are studies about fatness, I understand about that. But for children, the F word is not appropriate. The aim of the conversation is for the child to grow into their weight. It's really important to make sure whānau understand that the aim of this conversation is not that the child goes on a diet. And because the media has done such a good job at saying, if you're not a healthy weight, you need to go on the diet, you need to make sure that when whānau leave your practice, that they understand this is about their child growing into their weight, not putting on any more weight, hopefully, growing taller, and not having a deprivation approach and depriving that child. Okay, so what I'd like to introduce today is the stages of change. You'll all know this model. You know that it came from an addiction base, but actually I just want to talk about it from a behaviour change. So behaviour change is complex. Every single one of us in this room do things that are not good for us. Some like me, more often than you guys do. Every single one of us in this room know when we do something that's not good for us, what we should be doing instead, okay? I don't need someone to tell me that I need to be more active and eat less. Guess what? I know. And to his credit, my GP doesn't have that conversation with me. What I want to talk about is that changing behaviour is really complex, and it takes much more than you handing out a pamphlet. You have to have a really great, non-judgmental, put your big pants on conversation with a whānau about this. And what I want you to think about is tailoring your conversation to where you think whānau are. So, first of all, I want you, these things are in the pack. I'm only going to speak to 8 slides. I want you to tailor your conversation to this. It's called a growth ruler. It activates prior knowledge. It comes from adult education, my background, adult literacy. Get whānau to think, where's their child on this ruler? Say to them, where do you think Susan is in this ruler? And my mum's going, oh, she's not a healthy weight. So she'd put me in the orange. My mum was a kind person. My dad would have probably put me in the red. And then you do the measurements, okay? And I recommend you use the Ministry of Health's BMI calculator because it uses the same visual display. You can show whānau what you're doing as you put it in, and it brings up the same information about centiles. But it also you'll be able to compare it, show, look, you were right. You did think that Susan was an unhealthy weight, but she's a little bit further along than you thought. Tell me, does that surprise you? Tell me, what do you think about that? And wait. And then, depending on the response, you can move on. Okay, this is just for your information. This is at stage 1, developed by John McMenamin. He's a GP at Whanau. He uses these with a number of behavioural change processes. This is a framework for a respectful conversation with whānau who are not yet ready to consider making a change. Okay? Do you have any concerns? Do whānau or friends have concerns? School have concerns? Is it okay if I tell you my concerns? And if they say no, just say, that's okay. I'll make a note of that. But if it's okay, I'm going to follow up with you in 3 months or 6 months in case you've changed your mind. Okay? I'm not going to go through this. It's there. If they're at stage 2, if there's sort of like, I can see, thinking, if they're thinking here, actually, I can see there's a bit of a problem here. You can use these sets of questions. You don't have to use both sets, but you can use one or the other. I tend to use both. And what you're trying to get is the emphasis. Is the emphasis on the change or is the emphasis on staying the same? And depending on the emphasis, you might think, okay, maybe this is an opportunity to give a nudge and push them to stage 3, just nudge and just see if they'll go to stage 3. Or maybe it's an opportunity where whānau actually need to have some time. They can be given, I'm going to show you something in a minute, they can be given something and then you say, right, this is an opportunity for you to think about it. I'm going to contact you and follow you up and see how you're going. If they're ready to make changes, you can say, it's great that you're ready to make a change. What's one change you think you could make? And you can use these. So I've got some copies. The one here, this one here is the one I prefer. Okay, it's simple, pictorial, straightforward. This one here is great for taking a food and behaviour history, but it's complex linguistically, and it's difficult for people who don't have English as a first language, and even those people struggle with this because it's got two R's, which are both double negative questions. This one here is very much focused on the child. You can order them online, but the problem is it makes the child the problem. So the behaviour has to change by the child, not by the whole whānau. And what you really want is a whole whānau approach. Make sure you write down the reasons for change. Okay, I come from a farming background. Robust people in our whānau, particularly my father. He didn't ever call anything a spade, it was always something else. Now, FU in our whānau means something quite different. In primary care, FU means follow up. Please follow up these whānau. Do not think, phew, thank God that was over, let's get on. Follow them up. If you're lucky enough to have health coaches in your practice, get the health coach to follow them up. But make sure the health coach knows this is not about someone going on a diet. This child's not going on a diet. This child is thinking about other things. And the last thing, I've got some other stuff here and I'm just going to leave it for you to look at. When I used to work in counties, I would go out to primary care practice and meet with the nurses. And I'd say to them, show me the record of a child you saw yesterday, or a child you saw for the IMS. And they'd show me, and I'd say, where's the height measurement? We would have weight, no height. Mothers at the before school check at 4 were really incensed that you guys, who they trust and rely on, had not raised that their child was not a healthy weight before they saw the before school nurse. They were horrified and angry, and it makes it very difficult for you to have a follow-up conversation. So please have that follow-up conversation. And if anyone is an opportunist, I have some resources that I've realised I could give away. But also there is a clinical pathway, it's being updated, and so all the material that I've just talked about will be available. So kia ora, thank you.